Hey guys, welcome to lesson number 4 for refining your rhetoric. Today we're going to be talking about pronouns, and pronouns are something that we all use all the time, and a lot of times in our writing we misuse them. So today we're going to talk about ways to use them carefully and to make our writing stronger because of that. As usual, this is adapted from our textbook, and you can find more information on this stuff on pages 583 to 588, but hopefully most of what you need is going to be in this show. So let's start with a definition of pronouns just to make sure we're all on the same page. From the book on page 583, it tells us that a pronoun takes the place of a noun, which we call an antecedent. And unlike a noun, however, a pronoun defines the viewpoint of your writing. Are you talking about yourself? Then you use first person. Are you talking directly to the audience? Then you use second person. Or are you referring to a person who is neither the speaker nor the audience, in which case you use third person. So, and these are the basics, but let's just go over these and make sure that we're clear on them. First person, if we're talking singular first person, we use I, me, my, or mine. And if we're talking plural first person, then we use we, us, our, or ours. Second person, if we're talking singular, we use you, your, yours, and same for plural, you, your, and yours. And then for third person, singular, it's he, him, his, she, her, hers, it, its, one, ones. So this is the, obviously the trickiest, but probably not too terribly tricky. And then for plural, then we use they, them, their, or theirs. And one note about the singular as well, sometimes it is appropriate to use they, them, their, or theirs in the singular form as well, especially when somebody doesn't conform to traditional gender norms. So that is something that we can use in our writing more correctly today than maybe even just 5 years ago people would have said you can't do that, and today it's more effective. What the rest of the slideshow is going to be really focusing on is not just knowing what a pronoun is and that we use pronouns, but that this aspect of the definition that pronouns define the viewpoint of our writing, and that knowing not just how to use a pronoun, but how to use a pronoun in a way that we're using it effectively to define a viewpoint is something that's more advanced than just saying, look, I defined a person, or I replaced a person's name with a pronoun. We can all do that. We've all been doing it for our entire speaking career. But using them in a way to define our writing and define our viewpoints or define somebody else's viewpoints can be an effective rhetorical strategy. So let's first talk about consistency in pronouns, and I would be willing to bet that most of you are unaware of pronoun inconsistency. You probably make your pronouns inconsistent all the time, and generally when speaking, inconsistency is kind of, it's not worrisome. However, in writing, and especially in careful writing, we do want to be aware of pronoun consistency. And even when speaking, we should be trying to make things consistent. So by consistency, we want our pronouns, I mean that we want our pronouns to agree. And in that case, it will create clear writing. It'll allow for fewer questions about the meaning of your writing, and your audience will be able to follow things more easily. So we'll look at two examples. The first example of inconsistency in pronoun agreement goes from second to first person. If we look at this sentence, it says, if you want to find a better superhero than my current favorite, Batman, you will need one with the cunning and strength to outmaneuver my own enemies. Now, if I were to say this to you, you probably wouldn't think twice about it. But the thing is, it creates a bit of confusion when we're talking about the subjects of the sentence, who's doing what and who is receiving the action. So if what needs to happen, especially if this is a written sentence, is we need to make it consistent. We need to choose either second person or first person, depending on what's more appropriate for the effect that you're going for. So if we were to rewrite this sentence for second person, it might sound something like this. If you want to find a better superhero than Batman, you will need one with equal cunning and strength. And so this really simplifies the sentence. It takes me out of it completely, and you're just addressing the audience. You just tell the audience this is what you need to do. If I want to rewrite the sentence for first person only, then it might sound more like finding a better superhero than my current favorite Batman requires me to seek out the cunning and strength that will outmaneuver my own enemies. And this completely changes the viewpoint. If you look at the second person one, it's putting all of the expectation on the reader. You're telling the reader, this is what you need to do. You need to know about Batman and all this, blah, blah, blah. From first person perspective, it puts all of the responsibility on me as the speaker. This is what I'm looking for. It also reveals more about me, that I apparently have enemies who are strong and maneuverable. And each one portrays a certain sense of complexity that the inconsistent sentence confuses. Who is responsible in the first sentence. We simply don't know. Our second example of inconsistency goes from third to second person. It says, one cannot fight corruption if you have not first recognized it within yourself. And you can probably see the inconsistencies there. And again, you probably don't notice them if you hear the sentence, but the reality is it's not a clear sentence, and it's, one that an audience can just kind of pass off as, there's no responsibility put on anybody here. But if we make it consistent, we can either choose to write it in third person. One cannot fight corruption if one has not first recognized it within oneself, which sounds a bit formal, but we've fixed the consistency problem. Or we could write it in second person. You cannot fight corruption if you have not first recognized it within yourself. And I think we can probably pretty safely say that the second person consistency is a much more effective sentence. Where in third person, one cannot fight corruption. It takes the person reading it can read it completely passively and not really, it doesn't really apply to them. Whereas if we read it in second person, all of a sudden it becomes much more pertinent to the person reading it, and the person may start applying certain ideas to themselves. And so we've chosen in the second person one to through consistency to put a lot of responsibility on the reader that wasn't there in the third person, nor was it there in the inconsistent version, because it's unclear. So hopefully we've looked at how consistency can really help to define a perspective and define a person's, interpretation of a sentence. Let's look at one more aspect. So you want to think about what your tone is and who your audience is while you're writing. And in doing so, then you are able to choose an effective perspective or point of view for it. Some general guidelines, if you find yourself using first person, you should be using informal writing. Like it should not be a case of formal writing in most cases. Casual writing again. So things like narratives, letters, personal essays are generally where you're going to want to consistently use first person. Second person, you're going to be writing informally, but in a way that it requires you to address the audience conversationally. So in this case, we're talking about things like newspaper columns, op-eds, letters to a specific person or a specific group of people. And then third person, we're talking about formal writing. So things like essays and research are typically what we're talking about here. There's an additional layer in third person that we need to be aware of, and that's sexism in language. And that's become a growing concern over especially the last decade, but longer than that. We've just become more aware of it in the last decade. So what you should do when you're in doubt, should I use he or she, is you should either pluralize the singular pronouns, which I alluded to earlier when I was just defining what pronouns were. So use the they, their, them pronouns. Or you should use he and or she. The he and or she will help you acknowledge that, especially if you're trying to talk about, just say, a profession, and a traditionally male-dominated profession, you might just use he in the past, but now you could say he or she, if you're defining that profession and what that profession does. So you need to be aware of that, and that people are more conscious of third-person pronoun decisions now than they were before. Of course, there's always room to break these rules. And we have talked a lot this year about breaking the rules for specific purposes. So when you decide that you're going to cross the line and use a different point of view, you need to be consciously breaking or bending those rules, saying there is a reason, not just, I mistakenly have shifted from first to second or from first to third, but I'm consciously deciding to go and write this not in first person or not in second person, but in third person, or vice versa, or however you try to do it. And that conscious decision needs to come when you're building common ground between readers, like meeting the readers where their expectations lie, or sometimes breaking those expectations to make a certain point. So you need to be conscious of your pronoun usage and, making an effort to use it in a way that's effective for the audience. So now let's see how you do with it.